Hey everyone, it's Vinyl. Today we're going to be talking about my AUT update concept. This update mainly revolves around one of my favorite games of all time, Risk of Rain 2. So the entire update, more like expansion, I have a lot of ideas for it. Obviously, you don't have to, like, if the AUT devs see this, you don't actually have to make it all, but, like, if you see an idea and you're like, that's not so bad, you can toss it in. The update in total comes with 2 domains, 7 interactables, 14 items, 2 NPCs, which coincidentally means 2 quest lines, 2 enemies, 2 bosses, 1 mini spec, and 1 spec. Obviously, I'm going to go over everything, starting off with the domain. So the 2 different domains would be Titanic Plains, which you would enter through using one of the interactables, which would be the escape pod from the game. There would be one somewhere in the main map, and then obviously there would be one in the plains. It wouldn't be full-size Titanic Plains, it'd probably be a smaller version of it, probably similar to the size of the Dark Souls domain. And the second domain would be Commencement, which would only be enterable through Titanic Plains using one of the interactables, using the teleporter. It would bring you to the Mithrix arena after using the Effigy of Grief in order to fight the Mithrix boss. Now to the interactables of the update. So, starting off, it would be the most basic bitch thing would just be the chest. The chest would just drop items that are specifically Risk of Rain 2 items, so all the items that correspond to this update, and also the consumable items, like one-time consumables like the health potion, would also be found in these chests, and they would only spawn in Titanic Plains. Now, the fancy ones begin here. The first one would be the Shrine of Chance, which would be a permanent spawn. It would like sit in the map no matter where, and it would stay in the same location. You would have a total of 3 uses per day, and it would cost you coins to use. So the first use would be 10,000, the second use would be 100,000, and the third use would be 1,000,000 U coins, and it would reset daily. It can drop anything in the game, ranging from literally nothing. You could literally get no drop, so you could spend 1,000,000 U coins and get jack shit for it, ranging all the way to U fragments, which is the most impossible currency to get. And you would only get like 1 U fragment, but still, you'd be able to get skins, skin crates, items, U fragments, U shards. Not obviously not the fancy U money. I don't know the paid one, but you know the U shards would be activatable there. I think that would be a neat way to drop something in the game that we've never had before. I think it's a really interesting, what is it? What would I call it? An interesting interactable, an interesting new way to allow people to obtain things. A next one would be the Shrine of Combat, which would spawn with a 1 in 2 chance every 15 minutes with a total of 3 spawn locations in Titanic Plains. It would spawn in a wave of enemies. After all the waves are defeated, you would earn anywhere from 1 to 3 items and some U coins. So it would just be kind of another way to earn money and earn items. That's kind of the main point of this update, especially it's supposed to be Risk of Rain themed, and Risk of Rain's all about items. The Shrine of Blood would spawn in with a 1 in 8 chance every hour. This is extremely special. My idea would be it would delete the current ability that you are using. The rarer the ability that you offer to the Shrine of Blood, the better reward you will get. So if you scrap a legendary, you can get really good items, or you can get tons of items, or you can get really good, let's say you could get a really good skin, you could get a skin crate, you get a 50x skin crate, you could get a mythic crate, you could get, like, the better things you get rid of, the better reward you will get from a Shrine of Blood. Like, for example, you could maybe, let's say you get rid of Candy Cutlass, a seasonal unobtainable. The chance of you getting something like a Mythic Crate would skyrocket, because that is a super rare drop, right? So, obviously there would be bars, so if you got rid of something like Candy Cutlass, you're not going to get shit, but you're not going to get, like, you're not guaranteed going to get a Mythic Crate, but the chance of you getting a Mythic Crate skyrockets because all of the garbage would be filtered out. The next interactable is the teleporter, which pretty much just acts as a boss spawner, just like the one in the Dark Souls dimension, but this one is specifically used for the Risk of Rain bosses. So the Titanic Knurl, if you use the Titanic Knurl on the teleporter, it would spawn in the Stone Golem boss, which would be one of the boss fights. And if you use the Effigy of Grief, you would end up going to Commencement in the Mithrix arena, so you could fight Mithrix and get the Mithrix spec. The Lunar Pod is the final thing I considered, which I think would be an interesting way to use U-Shards instead of the current way you use them. It would be more of a random chance way, but kind of a better random chance way. So it spawns with a 1 in 3 chance every 30 minutes. It has 5 spawn locations total, so 5 of them can spawn in the map. It'll cost anywhere from 400 to 800 U-Shards, so it won't be necessarily, maybe probably more than 400, so it won't be the same amount, but the rewards are better. So when opened, it has a chance to give skin crates. You can get a 1x skin crate, a 5x skin crate, or a 10x skin crate. The 1x skin crate would have 80% chance, the 5x would have a 15, and the 10x would have a 5% chance. Obviously, these would not interact with your pity, therefore making it a good thing but a bad thing that you're buying crates from a lunar pod instead of buying them from the store, because if you buy them from the store, your pity goes up, so you have a higher chance to get a mythic, versus this, you will just get skins. But I think it's another good way to be able to use your U-Shards for people who don't necessarily want mythics, and they're just trying to grind for legendaries or epics or anything else. They could just go to the Lunar Pod and spend, let's say, 600 U-Shards, and boom, they get a 5x skin crate. Or they do it again on a different Lunar Pod that spawns, and boom, they get a 10x skin crate. That's 15 skins right there. A lot quicker than it would be to obtain. And obviously it doesn't interact with pity, so it's not like you're necessarily losing money or potential on people using Lunar Pods instead of using the in-game store. That wraps up the interactables, though. Now we're going to be on to the items, which there's a lot. So there are 2 styles of items. There are going to be buff consumables and quest items. We'll start off with the buff consumables. So the first one would be Soldier Syringe, which would increase your attack speed for about 3 minutes. Next up would be Energy Drink, which increases your movement speed, so your run speed, your dash speed, all that stuff for 3 minutes. Backup Mag would be a one-time use. All of these are one-time use, but Backup Magazine would reset all your cooldowns. So if you were trying to use one of your moves, you could instantly reset your cooldowns in the middle of a fight. Barbed Wire deals 1% of damage dealt to you, so if you take, maybe not 1%, but either way, a small percentage of damage dealt to you, and it deals it back, and it lasts for 1 minute total. So let's say you got hit by a cutscene move, and you took 150 damage. Let's say it did 1%, sure, that would only do like 1.5 damage, but you get the point, you get the idea. I don't know why I wrote that down as a stat, I really didn't think about that, but either way, the point is, it would deal damage back. Not a super high amount, but it would deal enough to actually warrant using the item. Brilliant Behemoth would be next on the list, which would cause all of your attacks to have an AoE effect and a slight damage increase. Alien Head would be another good item. It would lower your cooldowns by 1 second for 1 minute, so you'd have 1 minute of your abilities being faster to use. Ocular HUD would be next on the list, which would cause all of your attacks to deal double damage for 10 seconds straight. So for example, you could use Ocular HUD, throw out cutscene move like Divine Judgment, or any of the cutscene moves, and instead of dealing 100 damage, it would deal 200 damage. And then the last consumable, like buff item, would be Jade Elephant, which would increase your defense stat by 50 for 8 seconds, so it just makes you take less damage overall. Onto the quest items, which would be obviously super important to get any of the specs. The first up would be Titanic Knurl, which would spawn from the Risk of Rain 2 chests in Titanic Plains. When used on the teleporter, it spawns the Stone Golem boss. It's pretty basic, it's really not that special. You just get it, and you can spawn in the Stone Titan, so instead of like spawning in with U-coins or having to wait, if you have the item, you can just go fight the boss. The pure Titanic Knurl would be dropped from the Stone Golem boss with a 1 in 3 chance. When used on Samus, it would just give you the Stone Golem mini-spec, so nothing too special. The Effigy of Grief would come from the Hornet Commando quest, and when this was used on the teleporter, it would bring you commencement to fight Mithrix. The Drop Leg Holster would be earned from the normal Commando quest, which would give you the Commando spec, really just basic stuff. And the last item would be Shared Design, which would be dropped from the Mithrix boss, and when used on the Commando spec, it would give you the Mithrix spec. That's it for the items, though. I think it would be an interesting way to do it, though, is making it so you need to branch off and use your specs in different ways. Like, if you want to keep Commando, you can keep Commando, but if you decide you want Mithrix, you have to get Commando again, kind of like they already have done, but I feel like it would just be nice to have it kind of less quest line, like, oh, deal damage quest, or maybe, it's slightly deal damage, but less deal damage quest, more of like, oh, I have this item, I beat this boss, kind of like that. Makes it more interesting in my opinion. I also think just having all of these abilities would be super nice. I really like Risk of Rain and all the abilities they can have and all the items. They have really cool items for no reason. And I think having the consumables would add on to the game, especially the PvP aspect, or sorry, the PvE aspect. Like for example, if you're going to do a boss rush or a boss raid, or when they add, ooh, what is it? When they add, if they add dungeons, you could add certain items into your loadout, so you could go in with the buff consumables, and then you could use them in the middle of your dungeon to help heal you or help you out during the dungeon. I think that'd be an interesting thing. I don't know. That's just me personally. But next up, we are going to move on from the items, and we're going to talk about the basic enemy types that I would want to add, and then after that, we'll be getting onto the bosses. I'm gonna be real. The basic enemy types would be nothing special. They probably would be worse than the current thugs that have been added to, like the current basic thugs that have been added to the Waves game mode. There would be the Beetle and there would be the Lemurian. The Beetle would literally just throw out a combo of 4 rush attacks, which would just be its headbutts. And the Lemurian would be able to throw out rush attacks, but also would be able to shoot fireballs from its mouth. That would maybe burn you or something, but it really wouldn't be that special. It would just be your average basic enemies with like 100 health or going by level and they increase. Really nothing special. It wouldn't be that special. Like they wouldn't be anything to go right home about. So I feel like this would be easy to code in, thankfully. But next up, the bosses, which the bosses are super important. Obviously, the boss. There's not much to say. The Mithrix one, I haven't fully decided how he would work, but all I know is he would use the Mithrix moveset. And you would fight him by using the Effigy of Grief on the teleporter. The Stone Golem would use the Stone Golem mini-spec, and it would have constant hyper armor, a lot like Minos Prime, or Soul Survivor, whatever you decide to call the spec, or the boss. It's a lot of rambling, I'm sorry. And obviously, this means the Stone Golem will not take stun. The Stone Golem will also be larger than the player in size, and its movements are slow, but it will deal like really high damage, even compared to when you're using the Stone Golem mini-spec. It will deal higher damage. And obviously, you can fight this boss by using Titanic Knurl on the teleporter. Moving on to the Stone Golem mini-spec, because this is a very easy one to explain. Stone Punches would just be like, it'd just be a lot like Curse Punches or a Barrage, and you just punch people. Stone Clap would be just the clap move. It would just have a big circle of AoE around you, and it would just kind of be a get-off-me tool. It would have hyper armor, so you could send people away. The Laser would just be a hit scan projectile, so you'd have to charge it up for like a second, and you could just blast, and it would deal a good amount of damage as long as you landed it. Well, I guess that doesn't mean it's a projectile. Whatever, you get the point. It's a hit scan move, and it just blasts the enemy in front of you. The last move would just be Stone Grab, which would be your G move, and that would grab the enemy and toss them around, and maybe you'd beat them up, or you'd grab them, punch him, and then you'd shoot them with the laser, and they'd go flying. Something like that. Super basic. It doesn't have to be that complicated for the Stone Golem, because the Stone Golem doesn't even have, it only has 2 possible moves while in the actual game, so I wouldn't want to actually try and make it this magnum opus of a character. I'd really just want to make it some mini-spec that mainly is used for a boss fight. Onto the Commando NPC, obviously he'd spawn in Titanic Plains. It's very common, everything here spawns in Titanic Plains because it's all based on Titanic Plains, the domain that you go to. When approached while you're using Stanless or the gun spec, if that ends up being usable, like the thug gun, like the thugs that walk around with a gun in the wave zone, that thing. If that ends up being a usable spec, I'd prefer it being that one, but Stanless obviously uses guns. It would give you a basic-ass quest, just telling you to fight like the Risk of Rain enemies. So, for example, you'd want to go find a Shrine of Combat, and then you'd want to use that, and then all the enemies would come at you, and you'd be able to finish the quest a lot quicker. When completed, you will earn the Drop Leg Holster, which would just give you, it would give you the Commando spec when used on Stanless, or the gun spec if that's usable, obviously. But overall, it would literally just be Drop Leg Holster, use it, Commando spec, which now we're actually going to get on to the Commando spec itself, which is going to be a lot of words and a lot to, it's a lot. I tried really hard to make the Commando spec interesting and not just basic. Not going to say how to obtain the spec. Obviously, everybody already knows how to obtain the spec. I have said it a million times. So the moveset. Onto the moveset. The M1s would just be punches, but with the guns, you'd maybe twirl them around and pistol whip. Very basic stuff. E would be a bullet barrage, which would just be a standard barrage. Instead of punches, it would be bullets, and it would still barrage, clash, all that stuff. It would literally just be a barrage, nothing special. Phase Blast would be your R move, which would be a heavy punch. It would just be a heavy punch that's reskinned to look like the Phase Blast shotgun move. I think that's an interesting way to make it feel different, yet be exactly the same, so it still fits within the game. Phase Round would be your R+, which would take probably 1 bar of meters, so 25 meter total. It shoots a block-breaking projectile that can also go through barriers and walls. So, for example, brick battles like build a wall, it would just phase right through that. The next up would be T, which is double tap. You shoot 2 projectile bullets. It's literally the standless move, except with commando, maybe dealing a little different damage. Y would be suppressive fire, which would shoot a bunch of bullets from your pistol, just like D4C Love Train, specifically one pistol, because that's how commando does that move in the game. The last bullet would take a second longer, like it would take a little bit longer to fire, so you'd shoot off the initial barrage, and then you'd charge your pistol for a second, and there'd be a sound effect, and you'd fire, and if that bullet hits, it would give you pretty good stun. Next up would be G, which would be frag grenade. I'm dead serious. Take the world high voltage flashbang, but instead of it doing stun, it deals damage. That is all it would be. It would literally, that's it. It's nothing special. Your H move is where things get kind of funky. This is going to be a harder move to explain. The H move is chest, which gives you a chance to pull out 3 different items which have varying effects. This move would scale with the special stat, and it would use 50 meter. You would pull out either Tougher Times with a 60% chance, ATG Missile Mark 1 with a 30% chance, or Soulbound Catalyst with a 10% chance. Tougher Times would have a 5% chance to negate an attack's damage for 10 seconds total. So after 10 seconds, the effect would be null, like it wouldn't happen anymore. But for example, if a cutscene move was thrown at you, it would have a chance to instantly block and just negate some of the moves. So for example, actually a barrage is a better example. The barrage, not every single hit of the barrage would be nullified, but it had a 5% chance to nullify any of the hits in the barrage. So every hit has its own 5% chance. ATG Missile Mark 1 would literally be the soul move Terreno Magica. If I said that wrong, please do not kill me. I literally have no clue how to say it. But it would also last for 10 seconds. It would just have a chance to, instead of spawning in a sword, it would shoot a missile from the ATG missile, which would show up on your shoulder after obtaining it. Tougher Times would appear on your back or somewhere else. Soulbound Catalyst would be the legendary or red item, which would have a 10% chance. Dealing damage would lower the cooldowns of your abilities, and it would last for 10 seconds as well. If that needed to be nerfed, it would be nerfed, but every time you dealt damage, your ability cooldown would slowly chug down, just like how when you kill people in Risk of Rain or kill monsters, the cooldown of your equipment goes down. It would be the same concept. The only difference really would be that it is not on kill and it is on damage, because AUT, you're not going to be murdering a ton of people in 10 seconds. V would be a tactical slide, which you would slide in the opponent, and you would trip them. While they were mid-air after being tripped, you would shoot them with your pistols and then phase blast, and then they would get sent flying away. It's kind of like a cutscene grab style move. You could make it a cutscene, but it'd probably just be like a grab style move. B is the last move of Commando's moveset, being Equipment Barrel. You pick up an Equipment Barrel, and you have a chance to pull 2 different equipments with varying effects. It has a 50-50 chance for either of them. Disposable Missile Launcher would shoot a barrage of 10 missiles in front of you, dealing 10 damage each. So if you hit every single missile, it would be 100 damage. Gnarled Wood Sprite would be the other option, which would passively heal you and also members of your party. So this would be a good support item if you happen to get it when you needed it most. And it would last for 15 seconds total, and then the effect would be nullified, and you would have to pull Equipment Barrel again and hopefully get Gnarled Wood Sprite again. I think that's an interesting moveset. I don't know, but I think it would change the RNG being a part of Risk of Rain. It's a huge part of Risk of Rain, obviously, because it's a roguelike, but bringing that into the moveset, I feel like would come with a moveset that's kind of it almost reminds me of Kite from Hunter x Hunter, and how he just rolls for his stuff. I think it would add an interesting dynamic to Commando, using 50 meter, and hopefully getting a good item that's going to change the tide of the battle. The last thing for Commando would be skins. You would get your lazy recolors, because that's what they are. You would get the Hornet Commando, which is a rare skin that would specifically be collected from a Hornet Commando quest. This would not be obtainable through crates, nothing like that. You would have to complete a quest in order to get the skin. I think this is a great way to obtain a skin instead of it always being the same method every single time. The last skin would be Risk of Rain Returns, or Risk of Rain 1. Really depends. It would be a mythic skin. It would change the sound effects, the pose, your visuals into a more like pixelated style, just like Risk of Rain 1 and Risk of Rain Returns have. It would be a lot. It would be pretty close to true as Asgore. I said it right. I learned how to say the spec name, but it'd be pretty much just true Asgore. The only difference between it and true Asgore is it's for the commando spec, and so it would act like that instead. Yeah, I don't even know why I explained that. Now that we are done the commando spec, we're going to get onto the Hornet Commando NPC, which I mentioned for the skin, which is a pretty important NPC in my opinion. The Hornet Commando NPC would give you the quest, as long as you were using Commando, it would give you a quest to kill the Stone Golem boss, which would obviously require you to own a Titanic Knurl in order to fight the Stone Golem. And on completion of the quest, you would obviously be able to get perfected Titanic Knurl from the boss fight, but mainly you would drop you would get 2 item drops: Effigy of Grief, Hornet Commando skin. So you'd finish the quest, and it would tell you to return to Commando, or like the Hornet Commando after completing the quest. You'd go back, and he'd tell you you're strong or something, and that he thinks you can fight even more difficult opponents, and he would give you the Effigy of Grief in order to go fight Mithrix. And as long as you didn't already have the skin, you would get the Hornet Commando skin drop, so you could look, obviously, just like the Hornet Commando. However, this skin would not be tradable. It would not be obtainable from crates. It would only be obtainable from this quest. So if you end up losing the skin or getting rid of the skin, all you have to do is go do the quest again, and then you'll get it right back. I think this would be an interesting way to do it instead of always making you have to get skins by like just crates. And I think it would be nice to have like a quest-based skin. But that's all the NPCs. Next up, we are going to talk about the Mithrix spec, and that'll be the end of the video. Mithrix is the final spec that you would be able to obtain after dealing with the whole quest line, because you would need Commando in order to get Effigy of Grief. So you would need everything. So it would be like the apex of the update. It'd almost be like a small storyline on its own. You would have to meet Commando, do Commando's quest line, become Commando, head over to the Hornet Commando, get the Titanic Knurl, head over, spawn in the boss, beat the boss, and then you would get the Effigy of Grief and the Hornet Commando skin to finally go fight Mithrix and try to obtain the Mithrix spec. In order to obtain the Mithrix spec, you will obviously have to beat Mithrix, which was dropped from, that's not the right word, but I'm just going to keep going because I don't really feel like resetting this entire thing. But the Mithrix boss will 100% chance drop the Shared Design item, which when used on Commando will turn you into Mithrix. Does that make sense lore-wise? No, but I want it to be a very kind of important item. Also, make it untradeable, a lot like Evil Fragments. It would be a one-time. It would be for you. The moveset, E would be Hammer Swings, would literally just be cursed punches from the current Star Platinum Requiem, and except it would be with a hammer, so it wouldn't be like a actual functional barrage, or like it could be like Cleaving Strikes too, same thing, but it wouldn't be an actual barrage, but it would essentially act as the same type of move. R would be Hammer Smash, which is it's just a heavy punch, but it has a small AoE, so you just hit the floor, have hyper armor, all that stuff, and boom, people go flying. R plus would be a Lunar Pillar. Lunar Pillar would be a move that causes you to literally do Hammer Smash, like Hammer Slam, but instead you would smash into the ground, and it would create a pillar where the slam lands, as big as the AoE, and if entered, the pillar will do damage. It's kind of like old Barbed Wire on the World High Voltage, the original The World High Voltage. Barbed Wire, same kind of move, except it's like it sits there, right? It sits there for maybe like 30 seconds, and if you can push them into it, it will deal like 50 damage. It's a good kind of like deterrent as well. Like if you need to heal or you're fighting an NPC, you can try to lead them back into it. T would be needle barrage, which would be low tracking projectiles. You would just shoot them, and they would slightly track your opponent. Kind of, or I guess they could be high tracking, just like the one Soul Survivor move. I forget what it's called. Either way, it just you shoot them off, and then they deal light damage. You'd shoot off probably about 5, and they just deal light damage. Y would be crippling slam, which would be a grab type move. You would grab the opponent, toss them on the ground, and smash them in the hammer. This will give the Made in Heaven and Gold Experience Requiem slowness effects. Obviously, because you are able to Mithrix in game is able to give you a crippled status effect, which if that status effect lands, you are so much slower. It's evil, but that's not the point. Now we're on to the G move. G would be Big Spinny, which is the move that Mithrix does, where he kind of goes onto the ground and it spawns in a bunch of pillars that can explode and like attack you. I'll probably show footage of the move or something. I don't know, but you lower down and you would create like an asterisk arrangement, and that would spin around. And after a second or two, it would explode. And if your opponents were within that, it would deal damage to them. And you would have hyper armor during that move, so it couldn't be canceled. G would be lunar, or G plus, sorry, would be lunar orbs. You would punch the ground, summoning a few orbs that would circle around and kind of just keep going for a little bit. And if the orb landed, it would deal some damage. Each orb that landed would deal damage. It wouldn't just be one orb then done. H would be Shockwave, which would literally be a copy of Die from Soul Survivor, essentially, but instead it would also push out a Shockwave in the direction that you're facing, and that Shockwave would be required to be jumped over. That would not be a move. That would be you could maybe dash through it with the iframes, but it would not be a block move. That would block break, and you would need to jump or dash through it. No questions asked. You wouldn't be able to just kind of get around it. Then V would be Lunar Dash, which would just be time skip, but with different visual effects. Maybe a concept could be it would have a total of 3 charges, so you could hit it 3 times, but the dash would just be shorter, and you could just kind of go around, kind of like Mithrix does. He'll dash to the left, dash to the right, and then try to hit you, kind of like that, to copy that concept. But with the end of the Mithrix spec, that is the end of the update concept I have for AUT. I do hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble. I know this was a little bit more organized. It wasn't completely organized, but it was a little bit more organized than most of my rant videos that I just talk about ideas. But I do hope you did enjoy, and if the AUT devs are watching, if you have any concepts you like, you can leave a comment on this video if you want. I can DM you, or we can talk. And in general, if you see concepts you like, totally add them in. Or if you see things and you're like, that's a great idea, but I kind of also hate that, you can obviously leave criticism. Just let me know what you think. I think this would add a lot to AUT. I know this wouldn't come out instantly. This would take a long time to release, but I am happy with my idea. Sorry for this video being so long, but I really do hope you did enjoy, and I will see you guys in the next video or so. Have a good one.